Please rise while Adam Ramirez from the Hope for Life Community Church leads us in prayer.
Let us pray. We give you thanks, Father, for your mercies are new every morning. With the psalmist, we can say that what you say, God, goes and stays as permanent as the heavens. Your truth, O Lord, never goes out of fashion. It is as relevant as the earth when the sun comes up. Your word and truth are dependable as ever. That's what you ordered. Lord, you set the earth going. Lord, thank you for blessing us with a community where people can flourish, worship you in freedom without fear, and enjoy your presence, honoring you with everything we do and say. Lord, we pray that we may conduct our lives in a more godly manner every passing day. We pray in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we have two councilmen online, but we will call the roll and hear from them as well. Kristen, would you please call the roll?
Okay. Bueller?
Here.
Danforth?
Here.
Holeen?
Here.
Paulson? Here. Shetty?
Here.
Tupper?
Here.
Vilhauer?
Here.
Thank you.
Quorum is established. With that, the chair will entertain a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda. Motion made by Councilman Bueller, seconded by Councilman Paulson. Okay. Any conversation on that? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay.
Aye.
Motion carries. Now it is time for public comments. If anyone is here who would like to speak on something that is not on tonight's agenda, now is your time to do so. I will close the public comments, open it up for a motion to approve tonight's agenda with one slight change. We are removing item D. We are removing item D. So with that revision, the chair will entertain a motion to approve tonight's agenda. Motion made by Councilman Vilhauer, seconded by Councilman Bueller. Any conversation on that? Hearing none. Motion is to approve the agenda. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item A is an approval of the resolution levying assessment 22-34 for the assessment of the 10th Avenue North sidewalk and sanitary sewer installed in conjunction with the 10th Avenue North reconstruction project. We will go to our finance officer, Kristen Bobzien, for more information. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Heath. Sorry.
No, I do appreciate
Public Works
that.
Director Heath Von Eye. Sorry.
I appreciated it, Mayor. I thought maybe I was getting off here for the evening. Now, this is an action item related to the 10th Avenue North Reconstruct project. If I could take the council back in memory here to sometime back when we started the project, we talked about sidewalks and sewer service needs throughout the length of the project scope, and the need to perform sidewalk installations. And then there were a select handful of locations that required new sanitary sewer service lines to the residents along there. So this action tonight is formalizing that assessment to be filed against those properties so that those costs can then be paid back through their tax assessments through the county. The first step in that process was the resolution of necessity that, again, we performed several months back before the construction of the project, where we provide notice of the necessity for the improvements, which would be the sidewalk installation on properties that didn't have sidewalk, and sidewalk repair on properties where their sidewalk existed but did not meet our ADA compliance requirements. There were trip hazards, sections missing, things of that nature that needed to be corrected. We did not charge homeowners for replacing sidewalk that was in good condition. That was incorporated into the cost of the project. And the other component of this, as I mentioned before, were the sanitary sewer service lines. We did sewer main work on some areas under 10th where we needed to do a couple of minor sewer main extensions, and that we covered under the project as a city cost. However, the service line work where a homeowner's service line needed to be replaced, that is what's being assessed here tonight, was also part of that resolution of necessity some time back. So it's a combination of those two items, the sidewalk and the sewer service lines as applicable to each property owner along 10th. And again, this is the last step that would file those assessments, those final costs to the property owners for their reimbursement for those costs through the tax assessment process with the county. With that, I have staff on hand, and we're able to help answer any questions that might come up here through the discussion.
Thank you very much. I see City Engineer Marcy Luno here. Marcy, would you like to say something or just be on call for questions?
I'll just be on call for questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Chair will open up a public hearing. If there is anyone who would like to testify on this item, now is the time to do so.
Okay.
And please just say your name, and I assume you're representing yourself.
Jody Nelson. I wasn't aware there was going to be a sewer charge. It took a year to get this bill, and then the cost was different, and the city paid less than I do. There's nothing done in my yard or under my house. It was straight from the boulevard. It's from the sidewalk to the street. And I believe I pay taxes for that. And I'm a single income house owner on a very tight budget. I don't know what else to say.
If that's
There's no wrong way. There's no wrong way to say anything. Just say what's on your mind.
I can't afford this. I just about lost my house and had to refinance. This is gonna really hurt. And I had no notice, so I could start trying to budget. And I don't know why only certain ones got charged. I guess.
Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to testify?
They know me.
And Mrs. Nelson, I will address your questions, but I want to keep the public hearing open, and then I will ask staff to answer the questions that you had.
Okay.
Juanita Lentz. From my place, they had to extend the sewer because of the problem. It came to an end, if I'm correct. So they had to bring it forward anyway because it isn't where it was at. It had 4 different houses trying to use the same spot. So they said in order to do that, they'll have to go individually and bring that forward so that we wouldn't have to worry about backup in their houses anymore. Mine never got backed up, but the rest of them did. So I don't think that that's right to have to pay that. Plus, like she said, I'm on Social Security. My budget is right there. It ain't going no more. So I would appreciate if you guys would think about that when you've got people probably all along that area that's having a problem with making ends meet as it is.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to testify on this item? I'll close the public hearing, open it up for council action. Is there a motion to approve the assessment?
So moved.
Motion made by Councilman Tupper. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilman Vilhauer. I would ask our Public Works Director or City Engineer to address the questions that we have already heard from Ms. Nelson and Ms. Lentz. If you had them written down, that would be great. But Councilman Paulson?
Yes, I just want to add, there was some people that couldn't make it to the meeting that reached out to me, excuse me, that also have a lot of the same concerns as the two that spoke tonight. A lot to do with the sewer, and they don't understand why they're paying for it, and then especially the interest on a 10-year, at a 10% on a 10-year essential loan. They don't agree with that, so I told them that I would bring that up, and so we could discuss it here.
All right, and that mirrors a question. So just for the public to know, Councilman Danforth and Councilman Shuddy are both online, but I have told them they can contact me via the computer or via my phone. Councilman Danforth has asked a question, and he was wondering, other than the people who came publicly to testify on this, if there were any other objections raised. So I guess I would ask that to piggyback off of Councilman Paulson's question, and let's make that question number one to our staff. Public Works Director, City Engineer, would you like to address that question first and then go down to the questions raised by our two testifiers?
Yes, certainly, Mayor. I will defer to Marcy as any formal inquiries were made regarding the assessments, but none to my knowledge or none that came directly through me. Marcy, do you have any other information?
Yes, I did have a couple people reach out to me directly. Jody reached out to me directly, as well as Juanita, who are here tonight. But as Councilman Paulson said, there were a few homeowners. Kelly Schumacher, who is actually Jeremy Schumacher, 306 10th Avenue. They reached out to me as soon as they received the letter. She was quite surprised. They again noted that they didn't know it was coming and it was so delayed. She mentioned she wouldn't be able to make the meeting tonight, so I referred her to her ward councilman member, who is Colin, and asked her to pass her comments on to him as well as me so that we both could talk about that. I have had a few other individuals that said, okay, have to pay it, I guess. Not pleased, but okay. One individual said he still had issues. Now I've talked with our consultant about that, and we told him that he'll have to hire someone to find out if it's a city problem or if it's a problem within his own line that we didn't fix. If it's a city problem, we still are under warranty until November, and that will be corrected. However, if it's on his private line, going past where the city corrected, it would be his responsibility.
All right, thank you much. A question that Miss Nelson, and just, I don't know if you're married or not, I just call everyone Miss, so it's not being, okay. So a question, Miss Nelson, I guess it was a comment that she had. She asked why some people were charged and some people were not. Public Works Director Von Eye?
Yeah, Mayor, I could certainly help field that question. So the assessment process, particularly when it comes to the sanitary sewer, I think that was maybe where the point of the question was related to the sewer charges, if I'm correct. Okay. So the sewer charges, there are only a select handful. We got them right here in front of me. 1, 2, 3, 4. Looks like a dozen or so along this route, maybe a little more, that had sewer service line issues. Now the sewer service line is defined as the sewer pipe that goes from the house out to the city street where the sewer main runs, and the city owns and maintains that sewer main that collects all the residential service lines. So when we're doing a project like this, of course, we're doing a large-scale reconstruct of 10th Avenue. We want to make sure that the utilities underneath that road are put together in good order. Some of the homes may have had functioning services, but what we found was several of them are shared services. So you'd have a chain of 4 or 5 homes that were all running together in one service line, then tying into the city's sewer main. And when we have situations like that, there's a couple issues. One, it's against our current codes today, where today's codes require each house has a separate service line. It helps prevent issues if there is a plug in the line, drainage issues with that sewer service line where it's not functioning right. Helps prevent homeowners from having to figure out whose problem it is, who's paying for it. It's clear cut and dry that if each structure has its own sewer service, they're solely responsible for it. That's one of the reasons that that's a requirement in our ordinances today. The other reason we wanted to address this with our construction project is because but when it becomes an issue down the road and they have to reconstruct their service line, we didn't want to leave them under that shared condition because it's inevitable when they go to correct it later, they'd have to cut into our new 10th Avenue street and put in a new service line to meet today's codes. So that's another reason that we approached these property owners and said, while we have this road opened up and reconstructing it, we need to rebuild your service line so that it meets today's codes. It prevents them from having to do it in the future, and also the other benefit, if you will, of doing it now with the project, it also prevents that homeowner from having to pay for the street costs that they'd have to incur if they're cutting in a new service line later on. Those costs, of course, were borne with the project and paid for by the city, but we just strictly assessed the sewer costs back to the property owner. The explanation on why that service line is paid for by the owner, the best explanation I can give is that's currently how city code is written. Our city ordinances, just like our water service lines, are under the ownership and maintenance of the homeowner or the property owner from their house or their structure out to that water main. Our service lines are the same thing for the sewer system. It's the homeowner's responsibility for ownership and maintenance of that service line from the house out to the city's sewer main. And so similar to the sidewalks, where ordinance delegates that responsibility to the property owners as far as the maintenance and replacement of sidewalks. There are other communities that do it 101 different ways. It's not uncommon to see it done like this. It keeps a clear line of delineation on who's maintaining what when it comes to service line work and sewer main work, and that's how our ordinances are currently set up today. Sorry for the long answer there, but I was trying to provide as much information as I could as why certain houses were assessed sewer work and others were not, and then give some context here on the ordinances that require those costs to be bore by the owner, not the city.
Thank you. Open it up for questions from the council. Councilman Vilhauer. Councilman Tupper, you were.
The original, I must think how I want to say this, Director Von Eye. Were these people given an original estimate of what their assessment would be? I take it in mind that not knowing what the sewer system would be.
Yes, Councilman Tupper. The resolution of necessity, which is again the first step in the state statutes that we're required to follow, requires that a cost is included in that resolution, and that is the information that's provided to each of the landowners that are being assessed at the kickoff of the project. Now, I understand there is some confusion or misinformation where some of the residents didn't receive or have that information, but I do know that it was mailed to them, first-class mail, not certified, so we weren't able to verify it through certified mail. But the project team, including Marcy, mailed out the notices as part of that resolution of necessity when we kicked off the project.
So the only unknown would have been when you were tearing up and noticed multiple sewer lines that had to be replaced, and what you could say about imagine in that part of town the records that were kept before in the past weren't very good. So.
And for the most part, Councilman, that information was in hand too, so we knew who to target those letters towards. Because we knew that we had a handful of shared service lines, and those are the ones that we, again, tried to focus that information to let them know. On a cost per linear foot of service line, it was sent out at $68 per foot, with the city's ability to see that number fluctuate based on how the actual bids came in and the actual costs that were incurred to construct it. So that $68 per foot did end up increasing to just under about $72.45 per linear foot.
So a lot of these people were notified that there would be some sewer replacement also that they'd be obligated to.
Yeah, again, the letters went out, but I believe there was some misinformation that wasn't received at some point from some of the homeowners.
Thank you.
Councilman Vilhauer.
I guess that was essentially thank you, Mayor. Essentially my question too, what the process was, because I know we've discussed this before at this level. I guess what the process was at staff level as far as communication with the homeowners. So I guess, you know, maybe it's repeating the answer to Councilman Tupper, but I guess I would like to know a little bit more what the step was from, you know, throughout the process to keep the homeowners in the loop on this.
Public Works Director Von Eye.
Yes,
do you
thank
want to
you.
answer?
Absolutely, Councilman Vilhauer. So the formal steps are outlined specifically in statute, and that's what we follow. So that resolution of necessity, of course, being step one, we provide a letter, and statute allows it to be either mailed first class or certified mail. So we followed, you know, those options there and mailed them first class. Hindsight being 20/20 and talking with staff earlier today, I think we've all agreed that it makes most sense to send those certified, and that's the lessons we've learned in this process. Or any future assessments, I believe we'll be sending those out certified just to ensure everybody that's getting assessed has a signed copy or verification that they've received that letter. But those notices go out along with the public hearing notice as part of that resolution of necessity process. And if you recall, again, months back, we had a public hearing about the resolution of necessity that was giving notice to the property owners of these costs being intended to be assessed to them after the project is complete. And then we get into the construction phase and the work is performed. We see where the numbers all balance out because, again, state statute gives us that flexibility. We're not locked into that initial estimate, but can amend those numbers as needed to make sure that the city's made whole on the actual costs. And so construction is complete. That's exactly what our consultant did with staff, is to verify the actual costs for the sidewalk and for the sewer service lines. And then we compile all that data and put together the resolution of assessment in order to, again, follow statute to provide the information subsequent to this action to the county. And once that's provided to the county, it goes on the homeowner's tax rolls for their property taxes. And it is payable over a 10-year span, and I believe at a 10% rate. Kristen's nodding in agreement. And so that again is another benefit in some cases where it's not required to be a lump sum upfront payment, but it is able to be repaid through a 10-year process through the property taxes, which is helpful for some, but I understand not everybody is that even helpful for. So in a nutshell, Councilman Vilhauer, that's the process that we follow. If I skipped any steps there, Marcy, or paraphrased it well enough?
You paraphrased it well enough, but I do want to add that we also had emails go out from our consultant to all the landowners, informing them of different things, but we did follow the state statutes first. We also had some verbal conversations with some of the landowners that expressed concerns during the one-on-one meetings that everyone was invited to. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you much. I saw Miss Nelson shaking her head. Miss Nelson, are you saying that you did not get a letter in regards to the sewer?
Correct.
Miss Lentz?
I did get the letter. Sorry. I did get the letter that did say that they might do it. They might be, at these meetings it said we aren't sure what's going on yet. And then I come in and they said there's an email that was sent out, and I told her that I don't do emails because, well, I must be old, so. But that's, and then I said, can you maybe send out a letter, because some of us don't do emails. So that's probably why the letter came out this time.
Okay. Engineer Luno?
If I can address that. So we sent out the notice of hearing letter for the resolution of necessity, as he stated the process. So they would have received that in the mail. So that was the notice for the first one, which was in January of 2021. So yes, we are over a year past that. Then they received a second letter, which was the notice of hearing for this resolution of levying the assessments. That one was inaccurate, and I had to adjust the costs on it. I had added the cost of the city's portion in with their original letter. So then that was amended, and they received a third letter for the resolution of levying the assessment and notice of hearing for today, with the corrected amount in the sanitary and the same amounts that they were going to get for sidewalk. Now, the portion that Juanita's referring to for the emails is we sent out update emails to everybody during the project and before and when everything was going to start. And then Juanita informed me just this spring that she don't do emails. So I did print her off the letter, a couple of the emails that were sent later last fall on some information.
Thank you. Councilman Danforth would like to ask questions or say something. Councilman Danforth.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. And Mayor, if you'll give me just a little bit of diligence here in regard to, I got about 2 or 3 just informational questions, if I could just ding through those.
Granted.
When they were originally notified, was each property owner notified of the scope of work that pertained to them, or just their costs? That's one question. The other question would be, are these costs that are being assessed to these homeowners, are these all typical costs that are, I know they are being done now, but is it normal to go through and do an assessment of all these types of items as are being assessed back to them now? And what is the total assessments going back to, total dollars going back to the landowners?
All right, thank you, Councilman. Public Works Director Von Eye, did you get those questions written down?
I believe so.
Okay. If you would, please answer them in order.
As far as whether each owner was notified of the extent of their costs, I will rely on Marcy for that. I do know that the unit prices are notified, they're provided notice of the unit prices. So the $68 per linear foot of sewer service, for example, was provided. Marcy, can you expand on whether specific estimates of their costs were provided further than that?
Nothing specific as far as the resolution of necessity. We only included the estimated cost per linear foot on that one. Now, the resolution levying the assessment, we sent out a letter specifically stating what their cost would be because it was per linear foot. And then we also give the assessment roll to the finance office so that anyone can come in and look at that.
To the second question is whether it's normal to perform these types of assessments in our projects. I believe was your question, Councilman Danforth. And for what we're assessing here, yes, I'd say it's absolutely normal. It's not common that we have this extent of work to be performed on private service lines. But when we do, we follow suit with our ordinances that's the requirement of the property owner and follow through with those assessments in that way. And the totals, I'm glad you asked that. I was going to bring that up, Councilman Danforth. They range. We have one property that just had some nominal sidewalk work to the tune of $43.50. all the way up to one of the sewer service lines, looks to be probably the most expensive on the list here, is $4,274 for their assessment. So we have a wide range of assessments between $40 and $4,000.
What's the aggregate?
Total combined, Marcy is compiling that. I do not have that on my spreadsheet here.
Councilman Danforth, are you satisfied with those answers as of now?
Well, the only thing I want to just follow up a little bit on is my question about were they notified of I know they were notified of an estimated cost, but it's not clear to me that it was communicated to them exactly what the scope of work for their individual properties were. Because in the answer, they kept referencing, the cost of square foot or the linear foot. But did each property know that I'm getting an estimate of X dollars for a sewer line, I'm getting X dollars for a sidewalk, I'm getting X dollars for whatever all is being done that I'm being assessed for? Was that clearly laid out for them as to what they were paying for? Not the dollars, but the physical work they were paying for?
Public Works Director Von Eye.
So again, relying on the statutory process that we follow, it unfortunately doesn't require that those details be laid out. I think that one of the reasons it doesn't require that is because of the scope and magnitude of knowing those specifics at that phase early on isn't necessarily locked in, depending on the project, depending on the circumstances, depending on what needs to be done for each homeowner. So statutorily, I think they left that level of detail out for a reason. In hindsight, could we have provided letters with exact footages? Possibly. Those would have likely have shifted, though, too, throughout the construction phase and been amended, just like the unit pricing was. But we did follow state statutes in providing the information that we did. I did want to emphasize that.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting that we didn't, Heath, on that. I'm just curious. I'm one of those guys that if I'm going to get a letter and it's going to tell me I'm being charged for something, I want to know not how much I'm being charged, but I want to know specifically what I'm being charged for. And that's really the basis of my question is did they understand what they were being charged for specifically on a property by property basis? And it sounds like maybe not.
Director Von Eye.
Yes, with the only exception, Councilman Danforth, that I would add, just to keep in perspective, that as Marcy mentioned, there was a large amount of collaboration with the property owners along this, between the public meetings before the construction project, the letters that were mailed by our consultant, the interaction with in public meetings, and the process, again, we're required to do by statute by having the public hearing on the resolution of necessity. All those things play into that equation of getting that information out there to each of the landowners. So even though it might have been not specifically spelled out in one of the letters they received, there are several opportunities along the way for them to reach out to us, where we're reaching out to them, we're sharing information, we're answering questions at a multitude of levels between our consultant, our staff, and our public meetings.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Councilman Bueller.
Thank you, Mayor. Do we know the number of households that were affected by at least the sewer assessment for repair or installation? Do we know that number? How many? 16. I'm sorry if 16. I didn't catch that.
16, correct.
Thank you. And we did have council meetings in this regard, and there was an opportunity for public hearings. In fact, Ms. Lentz, I believe you were at the January 19th meeting when we discussed this and the assessments that were. No, that's fine. You're fine.
I was.
Yeah. But Ms. Nelson, you say you did not receive any of the 3 letters?
I did not, and I wasn't even in the state.
Okay. So they never arrived at any time at your home?
And I have a folder of what I did have.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm trying to understand the timeline. Did you guys, to Councilman Danforth's point, sorry, not only did they not know necessarily how much they were being charged, but did they know before the work was happening, or was it as the work was happening?
Can I?
City Engineer Luno.
Sorry if I've jumped in there, Heath, but I just want to make clear the process. We went out with these resolutions of necessity before the project even went out to bid. And the sanitary had multiple discussions, because we actually had a discussion with council on December 21st, 2020, I believe, is the date I had wrote down. Heath would have to check his notes. But we had all of these discussions before the project went out to bid and the final design was done, because we knew that we had multiple sanitary sewers that were out of compliance with the ordinance.
Councilman Paulson, any follow-up? Councilman Bueller.
Thank you, Mayor. Do we know, are we aware of any other folks on that project that are claiming they did not receive any notification, that were totally in the dark on this project?
None that I'm aware of. I'd ask Marcy if she has any more detail.
I had only other person that called me was Jeremy Schumacher's wife. I forget her first name. I said it earlier, but Kayla, I believe. She is not listed as the property owner, so it was addressed to Jeremy. So if he didn't open his mail or she didn't see the letter.
So 2, 3, if you, Ms. Lentz, but she did attend, was aware of what we were doing.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I'm not surprised that we're having this discussion or this conversation, but I would have expected that we would have had this back when we had the resolution of necessity approved back in, January 19th of 2021. I mean, when I first became aware of this, when we were made aware of it, I thought, well, there's going to be some upset people about this. But as I recall, when we had our discussion back in January of 2021, there wasn't much in the way of opposition brought. You are saying that you were, but I don't recall. Were there others that spoke? Because I don't remember a whole lot of conversation or opposition at that time, at that meeting.
Mayor,
City Manager Mack.
according to the minutes of that meeting, Ms. Lentz was the only one who spoke.
Okay. I appreciate the concern that's being expressed here, but it looks like our staff made every effort possible throughout this entire process to keep homeowners aware of what was going on and the estimated cost. And I'm sorry, but I don't feel like we have any choice in the matter right now but to take the next step and approve this resolution.
Thank you. Any further conversation or questions, Council? Councilman Paulson.
Some of the comments I've gotten did relate to the interest and if there was any desire of the council lowering the interest rate. And I've also gotten several complaints about the seating and the boulevards. I try to have those conversations with them because I know we just talked about this last meeting. It's kind of the same situation, but I just wanted to point it out that I am getting those comments from residents up there.
Councilman Tupper.
This question is for Councilman Paulson. You said you had 4 complaints. Is it fair to ask who those were also?
Yes. I do not have 2 of the names because I took them in my work vehicle and I don't have them on me currently. But I have Therese Erickson and Kayla Schumacher. Okay. And Kayla did explain that she was not on the deed before, but she is now on the deed for the house. So I don't know if that matters, but
those are things that we wouldn't be aware of. I mean, all we can do is go by legal deeds. So thank you, Colin.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments, Council? Councilman Vilhauer.
As I understand, it looks like most of the discussion, now you did raise another point there, Colin, but most of the concern is being expressed concerning the sanitary sewer assessment. Is that a fair statement? Okay. Because I going back over the history of this project, I had raised concerns about the sidewalk part of it because the fairness, or in my eyes, a perceived lack of fairness relative to the sidewalks, because homeowners in the south side were not required to replace sidewalks. You know, I lost in a couple different accounts, and I still express that same concern about the sidewalk fairness, but it sounds like we're getting most of the concerns about the sanitary sewer assessment. But I do have a question on the sidewalk, though. Those that repaired the sidewalks, did the city, because we've got a program that pays for X number of dollars per square foot for sidewalk repairs. Did the homeowners get credit for their repairs per our policy?
If I can.
Sure.
Sorry, Mayor.
Please.
I jumped in there. Yes, they were all credited the $4 a square foot for any of the portion that we had deemed the homeowner's responsibility.
Okay. Okay. Just want to make sure that they did receive credit per our policy. So, okay. Thank you.
Director Von Eye?
If I could expand on that just a little bit, just based on, the confused faces, I want to make sure we had enough information here. That credit won't show up as a credit, but what we did is we reduced the amount being assessed by that amount. Correct, Marcy?
You are correct.
They won't see it as a separate credit on the assessment.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments, Council? Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. I asked this question last week relative to the Third Avenue, and I'm going to direct it to our finance officer. That the 10% that we are charging, do we have other assessments ongoing out there right now that we are charging a 10% on?
That's correct. The 10% is the city standard.
Okay, so if we were to try to make an exception here, it wouldn't be fair to those that are already paying the 10% interest charge.
Yep. I think as I stated in the last council, 10% is the standard. In the time that I've been here, I think one time it was lowered.
Okay, thank you.
And that was Finance Officer Bob Zine for those watching from the seats. Any further questions or comments, Council?
Mayor?
Yes.
Mayor, I have a question.
Okay, just a moment, Councilman Shetty. Director Von Eye?
Going back to Councilman Danforth's earlier question on the totals for the assessments, we're a little over $36,000 for the sanitary sewer service lines. Again, a little over $36,000 in totality for those 16 homes having sewer service line work done, and then just shy of $10,000 on the sidewalk side of the assessments.
Okay.
Thank
you, Heath, for that.
Councilman Shetty.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, just kind of piggybacking off of Councilman Vilhauer's question on the sidewalk. I had noticed some time back that, the sidewalks on the south side were not installed, so obviously because they weren't required. My question, I guess, is on the 10th Avenue project. They weren't required, and yet for streets or avenues with, I can't remember the legal name for those arteries or whatever they call those. Certain roads they would like to see it on both sides. I believe on the 3rd Avenue project that we talked about this spring, it was required to be on both sides. So I guess just for my own information, I'm just curious what our process is to determine why they need to be on both sides on 3rd Avenue, for example, but not on 10th Avenue on this project.
Director Von Eye?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that question, Councilman. The logic behind not installing sidewalk on the south side has a lot to do with where the right-of-way is platted and where those houses on the south side were allowed to build. Their setback requirements on the south side at whatever time in the past they were allowed to build have a lot less setback on the south side. You'll notice when you drive that route that the houses are a lot closer to the back of curb there on 10th Avenue. So by installing a sidewalk there, what we'd essentially would have causing is a taking of a use of their driveways, really. It's also illegal in city ordinance that you can't block a sidewalk with your vehicle. Well, perpetually, that's what we would have created situations on the south side. Anybody trying to use their driveway would have been smack dab parked over top of the sidewalk just because of the structures, the garages, and the houses being so close to 10th Avenue. So it became impractical to require that installation and still have a functional, usable sidewalk while also having people being able to functionally use their driveways and garages.
Councilman Schutte, is that satisfactory for you?
Absolutely. Thank you, Director Von Eye.
Welcome.
Thank you. Councilman Tupper.
In most cases, Director Von Eye, in 99% of the cases, that wouldn't be the case, so there would be a requirement for sidewalk on both sides. It just happened to be one of those back when they were built that for some reason the south side.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Chair would just like to note, Director Von Eye, I think that you had some good ideas brought up by questions from council that perhaps in the future we handle this with certified mail to make sure that it does get to the person that it needs to get to, and also a detailed list of the improvements/expenses is also probably something that homeowners and the citizens of Watertown would probably benefit from. Councilman Bueller?
Thank you, Mayor. This question is for Director Van Eye. Have we, in the past, done certified mail for these types of projects?
Yes, actually, we talked about that earlier today with staff as well, and I believe the 3rd Avenue ones were sent out certified with resolution of necessity. That was before digging into the statute, realizing there's an option. Anytime we've had that option as a cost-saving measure, we've tried to just send first class if the statute allows for it, which is what we decided to do on 10th Avenue. But again, hindsight being 2020, I've already directed staff today to let's make sure these assessments go out certified mail.
Thank you. Councilman Bueller?
If I may, Mayor, just a comment. And this goes back a little history on that project. I know you had mentioned that some of you run I call it a manifold sewer system, where, and I'm very familiar with that kind of that system up there, about some of the landowners that I know. And I know that some of those were over time requiring a great deal of repair, and they were really aged. So it is, most of those, I think, at some point, probably if they haven't had issues, would have had issues. So now they should be in the clear. I am a little concerned about a concern that I heard earlier about, I think it was from you, Ms. Lentz, about some of these backing up. Have we had issues with that, Heath? Director Van Eye?
I believe that was in reference to their service lines having backup issues. And again, that's the scenario that really we're trying to correct and prevent from happening in the future.
Thank you. Councilman Tupper?
This isn't a question for anybody, but maybe more of a comment. You know, the city does have a program for sidewalk replacements with individuals. And we're all sitting here, you know, we've all got our tax bills lately, our property tax bills. All of our property taxes are going up. I know that's not going to help any of this situation here, but I would like going forward, if the city can devise some kind of program for people that are on a fixed income to help them out with some of these situations, because their hands are tied. I mean, here you're sitting here, you don't really have a whole lot of choice. Now, in one factor, though, is when you had your sewer lines replaced, that probably also brought up the value of your property. I mean, I can't believe that it wouldn't have. I mean, I know if I was going to buy a house and somebody told me they just put new sewer lines in, I mean, to me, that would be worth more. But I would definitely like the city to sit down and, you know, and maybe have some kind of application form that we could help some people. Because I don't think we're out there trying to beat people to death and push them out of their homes. And that doesn't help this situation any here. But, you know, I think that's something we really need to work on. So that's my comment.
Thank you very much. Any further questions or comments, council? Hearing no further questions or comments, the motion is to approve the resolution. I will ask Finance Officer Bob Zine to call the roll.
Bueller. Yes. Danforth.
Yes.
Holeen.
Yes.
Paulson. Yes. Schutte.
Yes, and I agree with Tupper.
Tupper. Yes. And Vilhauer. Yes. That motion carries.
Motion is carried. Thank you very much. Item B is a tax increment, Item B is tax increment financing district number 20. There are two separate motions here, but for the sake of the hearing, I'm going to ask our city attorney, Matt Roby, to cover both topics in general, and I will allow leniency to the council to talk on items 1 and 2, but we must take separate action on both items. City Attorney Roby.
Thank you, Mayor. So, by way of background, the council previously approved the tax increment financing district plan for TIF District 20 on June 6th. It's June 6th meeting. This TIF district is the district that encompasses the Sinclair family, Montgomery's Furniture, new commercial development plan in that area. And since the plan was approved on June 6th, there was some identified issues with the original the plan. Essentially, the project costs were too low. The project costs were originally slated at $9 million. They've now gone up to $13 million. And because of that, it's a pretty substantial change to the plan. And so that's why we're back here in front of you today to get the plan reapproved, as well as approving the development agreement that essentially just puts into agreement form what's more or less spelled out in the TIF plan. And I see the developer is in the audience this evening, and so I'll just leave it at that and open it up for any questions. And then I would note as well that we inadvertently left the development agreement off of the agenda. I have emailed it to the entire council, as well as handed out a physical copy to the media in the room. And the development agreement will be uploaded to the agenda after the meeting. So.
All right, thank you very much. In order to speak on this, we do need an official motion. So the chair will entertain a motion to approve the resolution, which is item number 1. Councilman Tupper, moved by Councilman Tupper, seconded by Councilman Paulson. Now, council, you can ask questions regarding items 1 and or 2. Are there any questions or comments? Councilman Villauer?
Thank you, Mayor. Really not questions as such, just a few comments. Those of you that have followed TIF discussions in the past, I've had these same comments, I think, with every TIF that's come before us. Want to clarify there are no advances being made by the city to the developer. This is a pay-as-you-go, so we're not advancing any dollars on the TIF. We are well within our allowable limits for TIFs that we can pass. I mean, we're the percent is so small as far as TIFs that we have approved versus what is allowed, so that's not an issue. There's always a question about, are we taking dollars away from the school district by approving TIFs? And as I understand it, this does not affect the state aid formula, that we're not hurting our school districts by doing this. And, I think we do address the but-for concept relative to TIFs, that this development probably would not have gone forward but for the TIF being put into place. So for those reasons, I strongly support this. And as I look at that area of town now, especially along with the mall even giving somewhat of a upgrade out there, their parking lot, I'm excited about what this does to that part of town. I commend Mr. Sinclair and those involved with the project for what's happening out there, because it's going to be a huge addition or a huge benefit to the community seeing that happen out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Any further questions or comments? Councilman Tupper.
I just got one question. I think this would probably be for Attorney Roby, and not saying that it's gonna. I know Mr. Sinclair's going to do things right in a timely manner, but on a typical TIF like this, is there a timeline when it's got to be completed? I know we went through that with the one in the Gateway District. That's why I'm asking that question. So.
Yeah, so I guess there's two timelines, I guess, that come to mind with your question. One is that if you're talking about the timeline for them to construct the project, that is, let me just double check the agreement here. I believe we put in 2026. So what we did is identified July 1st, 2026 as the deadline for construction of all facets of the project, and that's spelled out in the development agreement. And should that not come to pass, the city would have a decision to make at that time whether or not to, declare a default of the development agreement, or if there was some sort of issue that caused the delay that the city was okay with, we could certainly renegotiate that. As far as the timeline for TIFs in general, TIF is 20 years from the date of approval. So,
Mayor, may I?
Follow up, Councilman?
So basically all those TIFs are tied to more of a development agreement than anything else. Well, I mean, with a deadline of 20 years.
yeah, so each TIF we've approved has an associated development agreement with it that identifies a deadline for completion of the construction contemplated in the project. Now, most of the TIFs that we've been approving the last few years have been basically single buildings, and so it's relatively easy to predict when that might get complete. Here, of course, there's a couple different phases to the project. But yeah, regardless, the identified date for completion of all phases of the project is July 1st, 2026.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Finance Officer Bob Zine.
Thank you, Mayor. The only thing I'll add to that is to Councilman Tupper's question about the 20 years. So once the TIF actually stops at the 20, that's when the county will stop moving those dollars into that TIF kind of category, and then that's when it goes into the general category for property taxes. So they're kind of watching that 20-year slide, and then they'll stop those flowing into the TIF district. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments, Council? Hearing none, the first motion is to approve the resolution adopting the boundaries and approving the project plan for TIF number 20. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item 2 is the authorization for the city manager to sign the development agreement, and I need a motion. Made by Councilman Bueller, seconded by Councilman Paulson. Any questions or comments on this, Council? Hearing none, the motion is to authorize the city manager to sign the agreement. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item C on the agenda is an approval of the professional services agreement for a construction manager at risk for the Watertown Street facility. For more information, we will go to our Public Works Director, Heath Von Eye.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Before the council tonight, we have this contract or this agreement with RJM Construction. RJM was selected by staff after receiving a handful of proposals to be the CMAR, the construction manager at risk, for the new street facility design and construction process. If you recall, we've entered into a contract with JLG Architects to design that facility for us. We're a few months into that process. We're still in a fairly preliminary stage of that design, and we've decided to go through the CMAR process for that structure, similar to other vertical work that we've done for other city facilities, to reap the benefits, the gains of plugging a contractor in early on in the process through the design phase. So we get some value-added engineering throughout the design phase, if you will, from the contractors that'll be building the structure. So with that, we received 4 proposals, one from McGough, one from RJM, one from Pitts, and one from Mills Construction Companies. And we whittled those down to 3 finalists. We did interviews with McGough, RJM, and Pitts. And after those 3 finalists were interviewed, we then also reviewed the fees associated with their services. Their fees are broken out in a couple different segments. There's the pre-construction and construction phases of their fees. Those are known as the general condition fees for their work. And there's also a base fee, if you will, that's a flat percentage based on where the construction costs come in for the overall building. So between those general condition fees and base fees, we also had to analyze the proposals based on time, how much time each contractor thought it would take for their services through the design phase, through the construction phase, and through completion of the project. The average between those 3 that we interviewed ended up being 48 weeks, which is what RJM's proposal was a 48-week turnaround. in totality. So we had to do an adjustment, and that's what JLG helped us with. We adjusted this pricing based on a 48-week window. After that adjustment, the reason I'm explaining this lengthy story here, RJM did end up being the lowest proposal based on their fee after the adjustments were made to the other two proposers. Not only due to their fee, but more due to the experience that RJM has with public works facilities, street maintenance facilities, DOT type facilities of this nature. They rose above the competition in providing these services for us. So that's where, after scoring them and assessing the proposals and going through the interview process, staff's recommending approval of the RJM contract to move forward with them as a CMAR for the street facility.
Thank you very much. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the agreement. Made by Councilman Villauer, seconded by Councilman Tupper. Open it up for questions or comments from the council. Councilman Tupper?
Just one comment that RJM was heavily vetted in this process. Myself and I believe Councilman Bueller were there during those meetings. We looked over a number of them. They definitely did stand up and above the rest. So,
Councilman Villauer had you beat.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't want to throw cold water on this project, but you know we haven't seen final numbers on that yet, so we're a ways off from moving forward with this necessarily. Let's say that when we get to that point, we just have to put a pause on this project for whatever reason. How long is this agreement good for if we do hit that point where we've got to pull the reins in for a time?
So there's a couple different angles to respond to that. One, the pre-construction phase, the contract language references 10 months. That we have up to 10 months to complete the pre-con phase with the designer and the CMAR. Of course, the pre-construction, the design phase, we don't expect to take longer than 10 months. So that itself shouldn't be an issue. And those fees I referenced earlier, the upfront fees for pre-construction estimate and the pre-construction phase for other input they provide along the way, those two together total about $35,000. Again, expecting they get that work done in the 10-month window that we're allowed in the contract, we would be incurring about that $35,000 fee within those pre-con phases. I don't know, does that completely answer your question, Councilman?
Well, I guess the bigger fee as far as the construction phase, and let's say the construction ends up being a couple 3 years down the road. I mean, is this contract still valid during that time then, or at that time?
That far out, I doubt it, but I would defer to Matt. He might, based on his response, might not know off the top of his head
I'm not suggesting that's the route we're going to go, but I mean, if that does end up being a possibility.
I actually don't know that it would necessarily terminate, but we would have the ability, so if it stretches out that far, and you terminated before, so presumably you would make the decision to not move forward before you got to the
Sure.
GMP.
Sure.
Then we would owe whatever pre-construction and estimating fees that they have already incurred, and then we would just shelf the contract. I would guess that if it was really going to go out 3 years, we would probably give notice to terminate. But I don't know if there's any reason why it couldn't continue. Just based on my
Well, I realize you
recollection.
probably can't give us a definite answer, but I guess I want to pose a question, so thank you.
Right.
And Councilman Bueller, I don't mean to, I should have broken all the bad news to you right off the bat, but Councilman Danforth also had you beat to the punch. So, Councilman Danforth?
Well, I feel great that I beat Bruce to the punch here, but Glenn asked my question and been answered very well. So I'm good without any additional response, sir.
Councilman Bueller.
Mike, you are definitely quick. And yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up since you had the same question. But just my question, JLG fee, what are we looking at for percentage on architect fees for that project, out of curiosity?
Councilman, sorry, I'm reading here, trying to crunch some numbers. Let me quick punch that out here in my calculator and get back to you if I could.
All right, Councilman Tupper, did you want to ask your question?
Well, it was for Director Von Nye, but I don't want to.
All right, let's all just stare at Heath and make him feel uncomfortable.
Let's go look over his shoulder or something.
This is like trying to type something while someone's looking over your shoulder. And Councilman Beeler, you said JLG, you meant specifically JLG's architectural contract, not RJM's contract we're entering into? Okay, just confirming that. Thank you. Justin could correct me if I'm wrong here if he's got better information than I do, but I'm showing about 4.5%. Total budget for the total project is that's based on the total project amount of 8.8 million. The JLG architect fees and Stockwell Engineering civil site fees combined are roughly right at $400,000.
Thank you.
Councilman Tupper?
My question's for Director Von Nye. So the $35,000 that we're approving tonight, basically, let's say in 2 years we still haven't moved, just like Councilman Vilhauer had said. There is a lot of information in that project. Would that remain basically the property of the city of Watertown then? I mean, so let's say we put it off 2 years. We don't start from scratch again, correct?
Yes, correct. So the services we obtained from the CMAR for that $35,000 are all pre-construction phase services. So what that's doing is that's the contractor helping the designer, JLG Architects, make sure we get this thing designed the most efficient, effective way for the city. So once that work is done, yes, those design plans, that final set of design plans would be ours for our use in the future. There wouldn't be any proprietary reasons why we couldn't continue to use those down the road.
Okay, thank you. Let's hope we don't have to put it off. I mean, Rob's looking a little nervous back there, but.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Councilman Paulson, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't want to throw them under the bus by any means, but I will say during the bidding process for the ice arena, there were I got a few complaints about their timeliness on response and or just responding in general to the questions being asked, and they were not favorable towards them. So I would just ask that they be a little more responsive going forward, since we're going to have multiple projects with them, especially.
Thank you. Director Von Nye, did you want to say anything about that?
I was only going to reference, I believe Brad was going to log in online with us. Brad from RJM. I didn't know if he had a response to that at all, but based on our interviews and reference checks and past projects, we did too. We also heard some of the similar responses as Councilman Paulson regarding the ice arena bids, but I don't doubt that's something we can work through with Brad moving forward with the street facility work.
I see Brad Barrickman is online, and he unmuted himself. Would you like to say anything, Mr. Barrickman?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Good evening. Happy to be here, and I can address that question and or that comment that was brought up during the bidding process. There were a series of questions that were asked outside of the question deadline timeframe. And our instruction to our team is to not respond in an effort to not give one contractor an unfair advantage after we are outside of that question and answer timeframe. But those are the only questions that I'm aware of that we did not respond to.
Thank you. Is that satisfactory? Any further questions or comments, Council? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the CMAR. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item E, is an approval of the agreement with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for a flood control feasibility study. For more information, we'll go to our Public Works Director, Heath Von Eye.
Thank you, Mayor. There's a lot of information to share in this item, and I'll try to provide as concise of a synopsis as I can here. As the council's full well aware, we've been in conversations with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers over the past few decades now, as of lately. They are our go-to agency when it comes to flood mitigation in the city of Watertown. So I think we were averaging about every 3 to 5 years we were seeing some sort of a flood event, having to call on the Corps of Engineers to come help us with that, the flood mitigation measures to help protect the city from floodwaters. Over time, over the last few decades, we've pursued conversations with the Corps about looking for long-term solutions. I think that everybody over time realized the inefficiencies and some cases ineffectiveness of some of our temporary short-term solution mitigation measures, where we're installing HESCO baskets and things of that nature like I said, on about a 3 to 5 year cycle. So through those discussions, the Army Corps of Engineers helped fund, and the city helped fund, and I believe the state helped fund a feasibility level study for a potential flood control project, looking at a long-term solution, assessing what some of those long-term solutions might look like, what they might be, what's the economic impact of those solutions, alternatives, a very large-scale, high-level look at how we might better protect Watertown, and not only Watertown, but other subsequent communities or landowners upstream and downstream from Watertown from flood occurrences. So that fast forwards us to today, where we've had a standing expectation, I guess you'd call it, to revisit that feasibility study, to give it an update and go back to, in some senses, go back to the drawing board and see if there isn't a long-term solution to our flooding problems here in Watertown. With that, at the federal level, the Corps has been in communication, at the federal level for funding and waiting for funding to complete an update of that study. The state, in partnership with the city, has also been kind of waiting in the wings, allocating money for us annually in their omnibus bill. Don't ask me to say that 3 times really fast, but they have also been allocating money in their bill to come to the city of Watertown. And most recently, as of the end of last year, early this year, they actually formally approved their portion of funding to be extended to us again, to the tune of, I think, just shy of $250,000 coming from the state. So I guess what's happened now is we've got the perfect scenario where the federal funding is in place. The Corps of Engineers have been given the go-ahead to move forward with an update to that feasibility study. The state has earmarked their dollars to help match our dollars towards that study. And that's what brings this agreement forward to the council tonight. I would like to recognize we do also have a representative from Senator Round's office here with us tonight. Jennifer Heeb, I can pronounce that correctly, is here with us this evening. And I didn't want to be remiss in mentioning the fact that at the federal level, our elected delegates and the senator's offices, our representatives' offices, the governor's office at the state level have all been very, very helpful and very inquisitive about this work and wanting to help Watertown achieve some level of finality to this issue that we've been facing every few years. And so with that, we're appreciative of their efforts and have this agreement before the council tonight. And I wanted to note the numbers here. It's a big number in the summary in the title at $1.8 million. Now what that number is, I prefer the council not necessarily focus in on that, and I think the agreement actually says not to focus on that. That's a rough estimate from the federal government that they tell every community whenever they're doing a study of this nature. That's the number they give the community. They also know full well that in Watertown we've done a lot of legwork. They've done a lot of legwork for us already. They do not expect this one to come in near that high at that $1.8 million. It is a 50-50 match, so the federal share in this case at 1.8 million would be 900,000, and the city share would be 900,000. I'd also like to note that in the agreement, that upon 30-day written notice, either party can cancel this agreement. The timeline that some of the project managers with the Corps of Engineers have outlined for us, and I believe they're online here with us tonight as well and could speak to this too. But the timeline, I think, was very helpful to see to where we step into this in an appropriate way with the Corps. One of the first steps, of course, being public meetings and interaction with the landowners for some of this feasibility study area. And once we proceed with those discussions and kind of get some feedback from those landowners and figure out where some possibilities may lie with these long-term mitigation measures, I think that's a very good first step in the right direction. And monetarily, I believe most of that gets done within the first $25,000 of commitment from the city. So what I'm trying to emphasize here is we're not in it for 900 grand if this were approved tonight. But what I would recommend from a staff level is that we enter into this agreement and we kick off those initial measures as outlined with the Corps, working closely with them and any of our elected officials that may be involved along the way. And get into the details up to that $25,000 level to see what the next phases could potentially be. With that, again, there's a lot of information in this agreement. There's a lot of history to it, and I'll stand by for any questions. We have staff here, and again, Senator Round's representative is here with us tonight as well. And the Corps of Engineers is online if we could refer to them at some point, Mayor, for any comment they may have.
Thank you very much. I think I can leave them on standby to answer questions. Chair would also like to acknowledge the help and assistance that have been provided to the City of Watertown by Governor Noem, U.S. Senator Thune, and Representative Dusty Johnson, but special kudos to U.S. Senator Mike Rounds and Jennifer Heeb for actually being here to date. So thank you very much. With that, the chair will will entertain a motion to approve the agreement made by Councilman Paulson, seconded by Councilman Vilhauer. Now, Councilman Danforth has beat you all to the punch because he notified me before the meeting that he wanted to speak on this item. So, Councilman Danforth.
Well, as I sit here overlooking beautiful Lake Compesca right now, actually, in isolation due to COVID, I go back to, the importance of this lake and the surrounding lakes and what this study means to our community. So how important it is. But the one question I have, first of all, if I may, what the time frame for getting, if we had to get out of this agreement was what? It was 30 to, what was the days on that?
Director Von Eye?
Yes, the exit clause in the contract just requires a simple 30-day written notice by either party at any time to suspend or terminate future performance of the study.
Okay, so here's my question. It is probably, and I don't know the exact time frame, it's probably been a couple of months ago now, we had a work session specific to this topic. And so my question is what is transpired? And there was a lot of discussion, a lot of ideas, a lot of concerns expressed at that meeting. What has transpired since that work session in regards to this potential study?
City Manager Mack would like to answer that question.
Thank you, Mayor. We were asked to identify who the potential affected property owners would be, which we've done. We've pulled those lists together. In discussions with the Corps, we learned that, again, as we discussed at the work session, that the first phase of their work are the landowner meetings and public discussions, which was largely what was discussed at the work session, was how do we gauge public sentiment around this, who are the individuals who potentially, or property owners, excuse me, who would be impacted, and that's the work that we've done since then.
Councilman Danforth, you still have the floor.
Well, I'll defer right now. I got some other questions, but they may be answered or addressed. So.
All right, thank you. Councilman Villauer.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to follow up to your answer, City Manager Mack. Okay, we've identified the affected landowners, but we have not contacted. Is that a fair statement?
Correct.
Okay. I know there had been some preliminary discussions within the last couple of years when Roger Foote was still here with the Upper Big Sioux. I know he had some conversations, but there's been nothing since that time now. Okay. I just want to make sure we get off on the right foot on this. No pun intended to Roger, but get off on the right foot on this regarding the affected landowners, because I remember it did not go well when we went down this road 20-some years ago, and we got to do a better job this time around.
Councilman Beeler.
Thank you, Mayor. I think this is long overdue. I think, and I do want to thank our congressional folks for trying to push this forward and maybe get this thing to fruition, whatever this thing may be. We're talking about landowners here and potential landowners, and I think that's with the assumption that the project would be a dam, is my assumption. So we want to I think we got to be clear on that these are potential issues, because I do know the Corps has to look at any other opportunities outside of possibly a dam. That's a part of their study to make a decision on how we move forward and what direction they give us to build a dam. If that, more than likely, that's going to be the scenario, in my opinion. So I hope this works out, and I just am really happy and excited that this is finally coming to fruition. Thank you.
Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. I also agree that I think this is long overdue. Having been with the engineering department when we went through the flood of 2018, it was a trying time, and the Corps was on site, and it was crazy to see the resources that we had to use and do, and the potential positive impact that the end result of this can bring to this city and the community is huge for us. And obviously I don't wish ill upon any landowner or anything else, but I think looking at the potential impacts are huge for us, and this is long overdue, and I'm excited that we're to a point we're moving forward.
Thank you. Councilman Tupper.
I'll agree with everybody else as far as getting to look at this, and hopefully we can come to a solution, but we also got to be careful, because we talk about an impact on our community to get this done. And if it's not done in a proper way with the landowners, our neighbors to the north, that's also a potential impact to our community. Because I remember when, I don't think it was addressed well 20, 25 years ago. It had a huge impact on our community. And we do have to remember they are our neighbors. They may not live in the city of Watertown, but they are our neighbors. So we have to make sure we keep consideration for everybody involved, not just the city of Watertown. So let's, that's end of my comment, I guess. So.
Councilman Shuddy had a question. Councilman Shuddy?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, for whomever this may be, this initial meetings we're talking about with the landowners and the Corps and the city, just curious on the timeline in the weeks or months ahead, what that timeline looks like. And then also, what kind of data, is there data that's been brought together to make sure these meetings, because it can be a hard subject to have with everybody involved in this, especially with the landowners up north and the city and the Corps. So what's the data they have? Will they have something tangible to look at to say, here are the options to discuss? I'm just curious what those meetings may look like as well.
Director Von Nye?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I would like to refer to the Corps here at some point, but Greg Johnson and Sarah Miller. Sarah is our specific project manager here, and Greg at a higher level within the Corps has been helping answer some providing some very helpful information too. So I did very simply paraphrase some of their information they shared earlier about the process and those introductory meetings. And if I could call on them, maybe they could expand on that a little more specifically for the council's benefit.
Chair would like to do so. Ms. Miller or Mr. Johnson, whichever one of you would like to speak, please do so. Just acknowledge who you are and go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. This is Greg Johnson. I'm the Chief of Plant Formulation and Project Management. Hopefully you guys can hear me all right.
We can.
So I'm actually a hydraulic engineer by training, but I've been doing planning and project management for the better part of my career. I thought Heath did a nice job of summarizing kind of the agreement. One point of clarification that I would point out is, or one correction, the 1.8 million for the study cost that's our best estimate right now. The part of that first 25,000 is to roll up our sleeves and put together a detailed scope and cost estimate schedule for the study, in addition to doing the kind of the public involvement, landowner outreach meetings. So that's going to kind of all happen in the first phase. The standard agreement when we sign up for these types of studies with communities is actually $3 million. And so it's 1.5 million federal, 1.5 million non-federal. And the only reason I point that out is because absolutely we know quite a bit about Watertown, as Heath pointed out. It's been studied before. The state has done some studies on the Big Sioux River as well, and we think we can get the study done for 1.8 million, but we'll confirm that when we go through the scoping process. So I just wanted to point that out. In terms of kind of that first set of meetings, definitely want to collaborate with the community on what makes the most sense. Typically, the bare minimum would be that we would do one kind of agency meeting with all the affected agencies, and we would do one or two, depending on gauging public interest and participation, public type meetings that would be kind of a open house workshop, where we let people come in, we talk about the different aspects of what the project, we gain input on their concerns, things they want looked at, and so forth. But knowing the kind of the history of this site, in addition to that, I kind of think we might want to do, but I'm definitely open to suggestions. But one of the things I think we talked a little bit about at the working session was maybe we would schedule a day or two kind of around those other meetings, or maybe specifically set them up separately, where we set up one-on-one conversations with the affected landowners and just schedule, an hour or two or whatever it takes to just kind of hear them out, share what we know, and share kind of the direction of where we're going, if that makes sense. And, I definitely want to be transparent. I want to be inclusive. I want to be collaborative. I don't want people to feel like they're not being heard. And so we want to figure out what's the right mix of group meetings and individual meetings, if that makes sense. I don't know, Sarah, did you have any other thoughts on that?
Nope, Greg, I completely agree with everything you just said.
Thank you. Councilman Danforth had further questions. Councilman Danforth.
Yep. Thank you, Mayor. We all know that this has been previously studied at least once. There's been recommendations made as to what the options were for corrective actions or mitigation to the issue. We also know that ultimately in the end, what was proposed, and with that proposal, was very, very extensive costs. And we knew at that time that the city of Watertown could not just couldn't bear that cost. And so there was, at the time, there was a significant, I'm not sure what the word I want, I'll say a commitment, at least by the state, and I cannot recall if it was federal or not, as to a plan for funding what was then proposed. I agree. It's we've got to update the information, revisit what our options are. But I go to that next step again and go, is it even reasonable to think that a project like this is not going to be cheaper than what it was before? Is it even reasonable to think that there's going to be federal and state money available to complete a project, whatever is defined in the end?
Director Von Eye?
Yes, I will take a stab at that. Thank you for that question, Councilman Danforth. I'm not going to have the exact programs or hats or buckets of money that we would be seeking as far as by name, but I would compare a project of this magnitude to the other, the SRF program, the Clean Drinking Water Act funding that's available from the EPA channeled down through South Dakota DANR. To the liking of those programs, there are surface water management programs and funding mechanisms available for projects like flood mitigation measures. Again, not being far enough along the process, and again, maybe Greg or Sarah could speak better to this than I am, but I do know there are programs available that we would be seeking assistance for any kind of construction or implementation phase once we got to that point.
Councilman Danforth, is that satisfactory?
I was hoping he was going to tell me where we got the money, but specifically. And I know it's a chicken and egg thing here, but I always look at these things and say, okay, it's great to have the study, but how do we pay for it? And I obviously know that unless we have the detail, we can't even go ask for money or apply or whatever. So, I'm in favor of doing what we're doing, and I like the manner in which it was laid out as far as how we'd be meeting and what we'd be doing with how we'd be meeting with the landowners. I think that's absolutely critical. So I'm in support of this. I think it's important for us. It's important for not only our community, but it would help all along the Big Sioux River in the northeast part of South Dakota. So that said, I'll suggest that when time comes and a vote comes, I'll be voting for this.
Our city manager, Mac, would like to say something.
I'd just like to comment on the financing piece. Certainly there could and would be state and federal resources available. We also have the option to bond for something should it come to that.
Thank you. Councilman Bueller.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question and a comment. First off, I'll just, to Mike's question earlier, as I recall, Mike, Councilman Danforth, there was an allocation for $13 million, as I recall, by Senator Larry Pressler's office, federal monies that were available to us the first time when we looked at building the dam. My question goes to, I guess, Mr. Johnson or Mrs. Miller, Miss Miller. That would be, can we get a timeline that we could share with the public a little bit on the study, and if in fact this goes to a dam construction, what is the overall, just a brief synopsis of a timeline for us?
Who would like to take it?
Yeah.
Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, I guess I'll jump in. So the study will take, probably 2.5 to 3 years, I would say. Maybe quicker because we know some stuff, but there are going to be some technical. If we're going down the road of an alternative that involves a dam, there'll be some dam safety type stuff that might drag it out. So these studies have to be completed within 3 years generally. I'm anticipating 2.5 to 3 years. So if we're looking at, let's say we're looking at September of 2022, we'd finish the study in September of 2025. And then once the study is approved, there's kind of the path towards implementation kind of goes down two roads. One, it has to go back to Congress for authorization for construction. And then once it's authorized, it's eligible for construction funding through the Corps. And the Corps' cost share on this type of typical cost share, subject to adjustments, is 65% federal, 35% non-federal. And in the 35% non-federal includes the acquisition of any of the real estate interests that are necessary to implement the project. So that could be purchases and or easements. But we'd be done with the study in like the fall of 23 or 25, or 25. The design would probably take maybe depending on timing and stuff, would probably take maybe let's just say 2 years, perhaps less. And in there, the community would be working on the real estate as well. So the earliest we would be likely going to construction would be 2027, 2028. That would be the most optimistic. It could be 2029 or 2030, depending on, when we get the authorization through Congress and when the construction money comes. If hopefully that helps.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you.
I know that all of us on council, including myself, always make decisions for the betterment of Watertown and future generations, and this definitely sounds like it would be future generations for us. So, any further questions or comments, council? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the agreement. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Is there any old business? Is there any new business? Any liaison member reports? Any announcements? City Manager Mack.
Thank you, Mayor. I have two announcements. First, we will not be having a special meeting this Wednesday at noon. We had one scheduled. We'll reschedule. I know you're very disappointed, right? August 15th, we will have a work session at 4 p.m. to have our new logo revealed to us from Simple View. They reached out and they are close to completion and want to share with us what they've come up with. So that'll be immediately before the council meeting on the 15th. We do have a work session scheduled for the 8th as well.
So, all those people who like watching the work sessions or being in attendance, pencil your next 2 Mondays in. So, yes. Any further question or any further announcements, council? The chair will entertain a motion, or we have no need to go into executive session. The chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. Made by Councilman Tupper. Seconded by Councilman Vilhauer. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Stay well, Councilman Danforth, and don't get sick, Councilman Shuddy. With that, good night and God bless you, Watertown.